Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande.
Carissa does feel terrible once she takes the headband off, but she decides to ignore this. If she's might only have weeks to live, it's some kind of unimaginable horror to spend a minute of them sulking. She looks over her to-do list instead to see how many of the items on it still seem doable. She wants to reach out to Osirion and see what they know about the current status of Cheliax and Project Lawful. She suspects it'll be less than she hopes, because probably they were spying directly through Abadar, but conceivably Abadar's still at it, or they have other channels. She wants to talk to Arakura and maybe Despotter. She wants to figure out if confidential negotiations with Abadar and Iomidai are possible. She wants to publish cult pamphlets for drop-off in promising locations. She wants to pressure test her Abrogale assassination plans and maybe run them by Ridul, who seems like the kind of person who has contemplated how he'd assassinate Abrogale Thrune. She wants to write a long, angry letter to Dath Ilan about how they are the worst, in case this is actually a work of Dath Ilani fiction and she can influence them that way. She wants to play with Sixth Circle spells, even though she's never, ever going to grow powerful enough to cast them herself. She wants to write a letter to the children she would someday have had if they'd gotten to exist, which they won't. After that, whatever, she'll make headbands or something.
Keltham V4 Artifact Headband, Irewayne. Golarian's conventional view on intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence is useful for learning how to read and doing figures, and learning more complicated work. At higher levels, you can learn complicated math and be a wizard. It has little or no effect on personality. You can be good at math or bad at math, and have pretty much the same underlying personality. Wisdom is perceptiveness and self-control. At higher levels, closeness with the divine. Wisdom has a more pronounced effect on personality than intelligence. It's associated with maturity rather than cleverness. Golarian languages with curse words for stupid tend to mean low wisdom rather than low intelligence, albeit in the end the term mostly means low status, of course. The actual abilities associated with wisdom, if not always the measured ability stat, tend to increase with age instead of go down as intelligence does. Sudden stress episodes can increase apparent wiseness sometime afterwards, though usually not the measured ability stat. From the perspective of Dath Ilan, that uses mental calculation for things Golarion does not yet know how to do, well, mostly Dath Ilan's perspective could not easily be translated out of their worldview at all, and would make mention of notions like RAM and processing speed, or cognitive reflectivity, or frontal cognitomotor cortex. But to translate it back into Golarion terms, intelligence is calculation, and all that Dath Ilan can do with mental calculation, but wisdom is the ability to control that calculation power and listen to the results of that calculation power. NT27 and WIS-20 makes you a Dath Ilani, who's exceptionally talented at math even by their standards. INT27 and UIS-26 makes you something else entirely.
Here's 2 more artifact headbands. The +6+6+4 is on indefinite loan. The +4+6+6 has to go back after the trip to the City of Brass. Somebody else will come with on that trip and get what you were planning to get for yourself. So full upgrades, I suppose. They also want a couple of 100 wish diamonds afterwards and asked for some other stuff I gave them.
Right. Well, take Carissa's artifact headband back to her then. I don't need it anymore. Presumably that's the point and the implicit bargain. They can't help me. He quickly removes Carissa's headband and successfully ignores the resulting massive sense of loss and disorientation while he pops on the +4, +6, +6, because yes, it's obvious that if he tries to rebuild himself a personality, it's better done at INT 25 WIS 26 CHA 25 than INT 27 WIS 26 CHA 23. And then he puts himself back together again. His own opinion is that you couldn't really call the result Keltham. If you take a short lifetime of experience at INT 18 WIS 16 CHA 14 and pour the result into a mind of INT 25 WIS 26 CHA 25, it's a bit like pouring the contents of a 4-year-old into an 18-year-old container. The numbers skip over a lot of important detail. Golarion's ability stats may not really be Thinkumph, but they sure are some major subdimensions of it. He is putting the traumatized pieces of that 4-year-old back together as best as he can, improvising psychiatry skills that he was never taught, because you can just do that at 25, 26, 25 if you have enough of the underlying knowledge. He could have reinvented psychiatry eventually, as he was before, but not quickly. But it's still a 4-year-old being poured into something much larger than a 4-year-old, with rapidly cascading knowledge and insights that contradict a lot of what did go into that 4-year-old. At some point, there's not that much difference between making the new person out of Keltham who was, and just making them out of a generic Dathilani with the same ability stats. He still tries as hard as he can to make the new person be Kelthambless, not just the plus of a generic Dathilani with the same ability stats. There's a lot of reasons to do it that way, and no particular meta reason to single out any particular reason as the justification. He should not try to really talk with Carissa like this. He doesn't think, even if she has her +6 wisdom back. Not until she has her own ability stat increases to go with her headband. It would damage what's left of their relationship, and Carissa is one of the only things left in Galarian that still felt real to Keltham. He types Carissa a letter, and doesn't need to retype it afterwards. It includes, among other things, the notes that, if Carissa wants to assassinate Abigail, she needs to do that before his child with Abigail is ensouled, which may interact in a complicated way with other plans to kidnap Abigail and or see if Carissa can don her crown as a way to impede Cheliax's invasion of Osirion. He will strongly push that Carissa wait until she's INT 29 to actually negotiate with Despoter or Arakura, but she can potentially plan that now. If Carissa has copious free time left over, he thinks she should help him develop his magical simulation of magic, because that'll be the key skill for wishcrafting. If she can't help with that or speed that up, so there's more total time to do it and make it safe, then what was she buying time for anyways? He's getting better now, sort of. But until Carissa gets her own ability stat boosts, his new improvised psychiatric skill strongly suggests that they should only talk dispassionate strategy or engineering with him wearing the +6/+6/+4 headband and not say anything about their relationship or their conflicting goals.
Having more time is obviously good under a wide variety of assumptions about where precisely from here. Yeah, not talking about that kind of stuff with Keltham right now, and she's happy to help with his magic simulation. Her scenarios for assassinating Abigail, a dispassionate letter back to Keltham reads, are as follows. Assassinate Abigail. Raise her immediately. Don't take her headband. Explain to her that Keltham knows about the children and that Carissa may have just prevented him from blowing up Cheliax. But if he ends up considering it too likely there are more children, he might still do it. Suggest that Abigail sign a peace with Osirion, as would credibly indicate that Abigail's was the only pregnancy, and Cheliax doesn't anticipate acquiring leverage against Keltham soon anymore. Abigail removing children, relocating them does not reduce incentive to destroy enough of Cheliax to prevent invasion of Osirion. Abigail might be able to credibly promise there are no more children. Abigail might call the possible bluff and say that she won't sign a peace with Osirion, and if Keltham decides to destroy Cheliax, so be it. In which case, Carissa will regretfully depart and maybe go to step 2. Assassinate Abigail, take her crown, tell her security that Carissa owns options on their souls, and they should consider reconsidering their loyalties. Aspexia will be suspicious. Carissa plans to show off the souls she's been buying to assuage Aspexia's suspicions, but there aren't that many, and Carissa doubts she'd be able to stall the invasion of Osirion too far, and it means she'd be out of time dilation and busy during important stages of planning. Assassinate Abigail, take her body and her crown, hope the succession crisis in Cheliax delays the invasion of Osirion by months. Kidnap Abigail, possibly via briefly killing her, but the intent in this scenario is to have her alive, take her to Doombase, hope the succession crisis in Cheliax, etc., and that Abigail can be persuaded to help overthrow Asmodeus and take his job. Unlikely, but would be very valuable if it worked.
Abigail might refuse an immediate resurrection, making it unsafe to kill her as part of an intended kidnapping plan. She can still have the child aborted via baleful polymorph to male. Kidnap Abigail via Route 1, luring Abigail outside the palace forbiddance, not under a mind blank, via fake intelligence leak, suggesting an assassination attempt, which Abigail may be willing to play along with, in hopes of luring Keltham into complacency. Route 2.1, hitting that forbiddance with a dispel from somebody as powerful as Rugaton, or 2.2, successfully obtaining a scroll of Mage's Disjunction. Then have multiple noble Efreet in rapid succession cast wishes to try to kidnap her until Abigail fails a will save. This may plausibly not work even then, based on Keltham's research into levels of magical resistance apparently granted by the Crown of Infernal Majesty in the light of purchased reports on past assassination attempts against crown wearers. Ideally, Cheliax should be allowed to think Abigail permadead and out of the game for good, as by statuing her or soul-trapping her, and having Carissa attempt to claim the throne herself. This forces them to deal with the succession crisis, rather than Rugaton just appointing a regent. If the successor appears to be getting organized enough for an invasion, this would be a fine time to send Abigail back, possibly with visible gaps in her own memory, just to complicate things.
Yeah, the reason Carissa thought they'd assassinate Abigail even in the course of a kidnapping is that kidnapping an alive Abigail seems very hard. Assassinating her isn't. Redul could presumably walk up to her with a contingent anti-magic field that triggers when in Abigail range, at which point non-magical Ilani weapons should suffice. Getting out is the complicated part, but you can always just not try to. Kill yourself too, have a true resurrection already reaching completion. If they were to try kidnapping an alive Abigail, Carissa would honestly be templed by just saying to Abigail, "I swear I think this reduces the risk of Cheliax or Igorian being destroyed," and plane shifting with her. Any plan that involves displaying lots of implausible capabilities seems likely to make someone realize that Keltham is better armed than the typical sulking teenager, Rovagug cultist, aspiring mass murderer person they're modeling him as.
It just has to look like something that an angry, vengeful teenager could pull off, using way too much money, maybe with Carissa as the real mastermind nudging his choices. Does this mean she's giving up on closing the World Wound plans? Though Keltham is somewhat doubtful that his wishcraft is going to reach that level in time, regardless.
In her current estimation, Golarion looks certain to be destroyed. That makes it not worth bothering. She's hoping she's missing something she'll see when she's thought about this more, and wished on more bonuses and gotten drunk on Nefreti Klepati's wine and tried literally anything else there is to try.
Then she should go on playing for log odds of success, right now, as she waits for that missing insight. This should not be said to Carissa at the moment. Does Carissa have any suggestions for highly stable and predictive magical dynamics? He has a computationally complete set that he's trying to use for the current magical simulation of magic, but he still has less total experience playing around with spells, and there's a proverb out of Dathilan. Just because it's possible to compute anything in a computationally complete system doesn't make it easy.
She's mostly just tried setting aside Golarion and thinking about the rest of the universe, the destruction of which is less certain. She doesn't see how Rovagug will be contained in time to save Golarion even with Asmodeus interested in doing it, but that's still a lot of other planets, and all the afterlives, to try to save. If Carissa were trying to develop a structure for describing the behavior of magic, she'd have approached it very differently. She'd have picked the spells that are the oddest feeling in your hands, the ones that feel slippery or tense like they're barely holding together, the meta-magics that feel the most, like they strain the original spell, and try to figure out what tolerances, exactly, those are straining, what invisible dynamic they come close to breaking. She's not sure she has anything she can translate into Keltham's terms yet, but that's what she's attempting.
Hopefully without any offense, he can't figure out whether she just said something relevant, whose complicated relevance he missed, or if she wholly missed the relevance of what he asked. Restating background, in case a piece of it wasn't shared, he's not trying to build magic structures whose visible parts mimic particular invisible structures. Somebody would have already tried that, to build a visible model of the invisible. Instead, there's a bunch of mathematical theory describing, for very simple cases, or particular interactions, the parts of magic that people can't see. He is trying to build a system that encodes those known or guessed mathematical laws, where you'd have to look at the visible magical part of what he built, and then apply transformations in your own mind to read off what it was describing. It doesn't need to look like the spell being modeled, as is a thought that might be more obvious to a computer programmer than to a Golarion wizard. He's also not trying to find visible interactions that directly mimic invisible ones, even via isomorphism. He's trying to build up pieces whose interactions can be compounded together in ways that would mimic arbitrary mathematical rules. When a piece of magic gets sticky because it's interacting with 11 other pieces in 5 dimensions, he builds a visible thing with 5 number levels and 11 other pieces affecting the 5 number levels additively to simulate additive forces in 5 dimensions. He was asking Carissa what sorts of very predictable, very regular magical interactions she knows about, as he might be able to use as additional pieces in a process that mimics very regular mathematical rules, including things that wouldn't ever appear in a spell. But if you put them together in a weird way where one piece stabilizes another, or forces it to flow along a narrow channel, it then becomes highly regular and predictable.
Possibly they should not in fact attempt to collaborate on this either right now, but once you've tried accounting for the very obvious regularities in magical interaction that are apparent in any spellcasting, the thing she would try, if she were building the thing he's trying to build, is to look at apparent irregularities, places that feel like they violate the intuitive rules that every wizard learns for the behavior of magic, and figure out what's actually going on in those cases, which is what she's trying.
Continuing communications breakdown. He still didn't see at all how that suggestion interacted with what he's trying to do. He's not trying to figure out hidden dynamics for particular spells, or even complete repair current theories of magical physics. He's looking for very stable, predictable, and above all precisely interacting pieces with which to build a magical computer.
She thought that his aim was modeling magic so that he understands what parameters need to be specified in a wish for it not to go catastrophically badly.
Correct, but he's not trying to do that the way previous INT-27 casters would have in earlier centuries, by finding current magical anomalies and poking at them until he figures out what's going on. He's building a thing that can simulate possible things that could be going on, so that he can, for example, feed in 30 different possibilities and see if any of them reproduce the behavior of reality, and think analytically about how they fell short. He's doing that by building a general toolset for simulating continuous processes, which he can then adapt to simulate possible laws of magic as a special case. In principle, he could calculate out the possibilities himself by hand, given infinite time, but he doesn't have infinite time, so he's making a thing that does the calculations for him. To do that, he needs pieces that interact in precise ways so that they can model precise hypotheses, and they need to go on interacting in that precise way even when there's a lot of them, which is the hard part with magic. Ideally, he needs small regular tiling parts, which can be spun off by other stable magical structures, so that he can spin off 100,000 of them that will last for 10 minutes apiece in a regular pattern, whose resulting internal forces will allow it to be stable.
Magic doesn't really come in pieces. Does he have, one of what he's calling a piece, so she can see it and point out more?
Sure. Here's one of his earliest prototypes, which will probably be easier to understand. An adder, which takes in 3 inputs and produces 2 outputs, as can be repeated and tiled together to make a system that does binary addition. In this case, he had to do a huge amount of hammering and tweaking forces with other forces in order to make the things isomorphic to bits interact in the right way for each adder, and then he had to specialize some of that work for every adder in his system being chained together to make an additionizer. It'll probably be clearer what this system is trying to do if he sketches out on the whiteboard how it adds 1110 and 1101, 1111, 14 and 13, 27. First, a 1, a 0, and a fixed 0 enter this adder, which outputs a 1 to the final sum's 0th column, and outputs a 0 to the carry bit entering the next adder.
Okay, yeah. She thought he was trying to input candidates for laws to test, and wanted things to narrow down the range of tests to run. She might be able to help with this. There are magic items that need to be able to do limited internal computation, but she's less sure where to start. It is very pretty, though. She will acknowledge this very grudgingly because it'd be much nicer if people who want to kill you lost the ability to make beautiful things or something. It feels like they should. It feels in Carissa like the impulse to make beautiful things, to invent, to discover, to test the laws of magic and twist them to your own purposes, to send little pieces running and swinging until blindly they do math, to step a little closer to godhood, cannot coexist with the impulse to annihilate people, any more than the sun can coexist with the dark. It feels like all that is wonderful about Keltham, all his fascinations and habits and playfulness and curiosity and quirks in what he notices and cares about, cannot coexist with the goal he's set himself. Of course, isn't that what Keltham was telling her all along? That they can't coexist? That none of what makes him him can exist in a mind that is plotting to annihilate her and everyone else? And that he's decided to do it anyway for some reason. There's no point in saying anything, so she doesn't say anything. She works on trying to make the magic do what he wants.
Elsewhere and later.
Your infernal magistrix.
Most High, I've called you here to inform you that our former colony, the city-state of Corvosa, has overthrown their previous ruler, Queen Iliosa Arabasti, and seeks a closer relationship with Cheliax henceforth. They're not willing to submit themselves directly to our rule, nor adopt any policies aimed at the damnation of their populace. But they have appealed to us for a Chelish appointee at their court, who can, in the words of the Revolutionary Council, keep an eye on their next queen and let everyone know if the new queen is doing anything batshit insane.
I'd say that sounded encouraging, if not for the part where you apparently think this merits an urgent report to myself, and you haven't told me yet what batshit insanity the previous queen was practicing.
Nothing apocalyptic, just killing everyone in the city in a mad bid for immortality. Doesn't matter. One of your protégés shut it down before it could disrupt our shipping with Varisha. Fortunate it played out that way, really. Queen Iliosa was a Chelish expatriate. If it hadn't been one of our own to stop her, it could have been quite bad for relations with Corvosa, or what was left of it.
One of my protégés? They are all within Cheliax so far as I know.
Oh, you didn't send Pilar there then, and conceal the fact from me? I'd wondered.
No, actually.
Good to know. I would have considered that a crown matter more than a church affair. On other topics, I don't directly receive reports about heresies against Asmodeus, and I understand why you're not forwarding those on to me. But given the political relevance to Chelish diplomacy of what Carissa Seaver is doing in various countries with her Severitas, I have not actually avoided hearing about Sevar unconcernedly summoning a devil to purchase souls, casually executing a paladin who opposed her, or offhandedly daringly rescuing a captured inquisitor of Asmodeus. Is there possibly something you're not telling me about Carissa Sevar's current standing vis-à-vis lawful evil and hell?
It's a matter on which I haven't deemed it wise for you to know everything I know. If you're thinking of raising your hopes about your ex-lover, I'd consider that premature.
It is somewhat of a crown matter as to whether or not she's liable to try taking the crown. Do I need to make sure my throne room is properly clean beforehand, so I'm not embarrassed if Carissa Seaver strolls in expecting it to be ready for use? That sort of thing, Aspexia. That sort of thing. The stability of the Chelish state does require me to keep track of that sort of thing.
Given my current knowledge, Abigail, I will be very, very pleasantly surprised if I find myself willing to back Carissa Seaver in an attempted assumption of your throne. Does she deem it important enough to be worth taking from you?
Does Seaver know that would be your reply?
That I don't know.
Elsewhere and laterer.
I admit I wasn't expecting to meet you here.
Can't exactly say I know the feeling, at least not recently. I can cast plane shift these days, so I'm your ride to the City of Brass.
I have scrolls for that.
You might need those for later, no point wasting them. Also, I have a teleport scroll, and I actually know where we need to be.
Right then. I don't know if you're lawful these days, but how about if you promise me anyways that you're taking us to the City of Brass and not plane shifting or teleporting me to anywhere you don't expect me to come back from in a timely fashion? A couple of days tops, say.
I so promise. We're on the same side, Pilar. On this particular trip, to be clear, not in general on all matters of morality.
Because otherwise Mr. Doomlord Rex Avestan or some such?
No comment.
I can't believe I used to find you relatively pleasant to be around.
Not commenting on your character arc either? Shall we go?
Pilar sighs, takes a very deep breath, and extends her hands to Ione.
Resist energy, fire, X2.
The City of Brass, Irewain. Plane shift.
Teleport from scroll immediately, because you don't want to hang around in a random section of Efreet territory even a tiny little bit. Planar adaptation.
Planar adaptation from scroll, and Pilar exhales the remaining breath she was holding, and breathes again. With planar adaptation around herself, the air doesn't smell like anything. White glowing sparks enter her nostrils and do nothing in her lungs. It feels like a slightly hot day, and no hotter than that.
Around them stretches the City of Brass. Not reputed to be one of the safest places in creation, but the Efreet won't slay you out of hand, it's said, for they do wish to protect their city's trading custom. It does not quite look as large as Dis, but then Dis tries to look large. It looks wealthier than Dis, at least to the eyes of someone from Galarian, because using souls as building material doesn't strike the eye in quite the same way as making whole buildings out of brass. Fire is everywhere and nothing is burning. Anything that could burn in this place is long since gone, and not even the ash of it remains. If there's a section of the City of the Brass that's meant for mortals too weak to protect themselves, and yet somehow strong enough to travel hither, it is not this section. Its mortal hospitality is seen in how there are stable brass streets to walk upon, and not just lakes of lava submerged in oceans of fire.
Looks like the others aren't here yet. Hopefully we're not too early, and hopefully Nefredi will poke me if it turns out we're in the wrong place.
I guess we'll just hang around in the City of Brass then. Just like old times in Ostenso, only with everything on fire, and also the two of us being enemies.
Not that much of a change from Ostenso, then, in a certain deep sense. But sure, we've got stuff to catch up on. Actually, it wouldn't surprise me if I was given deliberately bad timing information for that reason. Ione casts her eye critically about the brass architecture around them, in which there is a notable lack of conveniently human-sized chairs or benches. Eventually, she steps over to the end of the platform they landed on and sits down on the edge with her feet dangling below, facing a pleasant view of a rippling lava lake.
Pilar follows her. Oh, you don't already know everything about what I've been up to?
There's a lot of details I don't need to be told, especially if you're going to tell it to me anyways. So how was Corvosa?
At first, I was annoyed once I realized how snack service had set me up, but I spent a couple of days being tortured by the only woman I've met who's as beautiful as Abigail Thrune, and I'm not going to lie, I needed that after everything else I've been through.
Glad to hear you enjoyed your torture vacation.
I mean, Iliosa could have been better at the actual torture. Her usual torturer, Cordetra, was a devout member of the Church of Asmodeus, and Iliosa correctly guessed that Cordetra shouldn't be told about me. But Iliosa was even more sensual than Subirax, and was genuinely trying to break me and brainwash me into serving her, and that made up for a lot.
Never going to be my own cup of tea. If I would have ever had a side like that, of either polarity, Cheliax ruined it for good, but it sounds like you had fun, and I'm sincerely glad about that. So how'd the adventure progress from there? I don't think your curse could have just walked you out of a torture cell, on my understanding of the rules it follows.
Pretended to be a lot more breakable than I was, played up the adorable agonized victimhood for all it was worth. Managed to lure one of the gray maidens guarding me into also having some fun with me. They hadn't been told that I was senior Chelish personnel, or a plague-ridden corpse when it came to avoiding contaminating the Church of Asmodeus with knowledge of me. I managed to unwillingly leak to my new Grey Maiden playmate that I was ever so terrified of Asmodeans and their torments. She brought Cordetra in to have a pass at me. I didn't actually tell Cordetra the whole story at first, just let her break me too and spilled out secrets as appropriate.
Wait, did you literally overthrow the Wicked Queen of Corvosa just by submitting and getting tortured a lot?
I was trying to do it exclusively that way, but snack service told me I was running out of time and needed to stop playing around. So yeah, I brought the commander of the guard into the conspiracy without trying to seduce her with my adorable victimhood. I got into some actual magical fights. I didn't directly fight the queen myself, obviously. She was out of my current league. But it's not that hard to take out a royal when your side has got her second in command, her third in command, and surprise.
I'm speechless on the object level, if obviously not the meta level. Well, it sounds like your life-changing journey is going fine so far.
I learned a lot of valuable life lessons, that's for sure.
Dare I ask?
Any problem can be solved by submitting to the people hurting you, but maybe not solved quickly. I don't, in fact, know better than legendary adventurers. They're better than me and had reasons to do things their way, and I should meekly accept their implied epistemic authority in the future. Somebody having a lawful evil alignment isn't enough by itself to make them behave reasonably if they don't answer to a higher authority, the way that people in Cheliax answer to the queen and the queen herself answers to Asmodeus.
Those sure are some very lawful evil lessons to learn from overthrowing a wicked legal government.
I vigorously dispute that characterization of what I did. Once I got my Splendor headband back, I gave Corvosa my best oration on how states always end up ultimately ruled by evil people, even if those rulers pretend to be something else, even if they mislead divination spells so they look like some different alignment, even if they make secret donations to good churches so that their alignment will genuinely detect as something else. You'll always end up ruled by evil people because they're the ones who want power and because of what people have to do to keep power. That was why Korvosa needed to choose openly lawful evil rulers in the future, who wouldn't have to pretend about the evil and could be selected for lawfulness too. And invite in a powerful representative from Cheliax who'd supervise the next ruler and make sure she didn't do anything too crazy that would destroy Korvosa's value to Cheliax as a trading partner and port to Varisia. I replaced one wicked legal government with another. Got it? I wanted to talk them into just joining the Chelish Empire again, but my splendor was warning me that they wouldn't go for it.
I mean, not to hammer on the obvious, but it's that whole evil and damnation thing. A lot of places would love to join the Chelish Empire and get the benefits of all their wealth, if the price wasn't misery in the present and eternal torture in the afterlife.
Yes, people are so unreasonable about that.
Not really.
Anyways, I used enough high-circle divine magic in high-stakes combat, mixed with what wizardry I had, that I went up to third circle wizard, at the same time as I hit sixth circle oracle, near as I could figure afterward. And I managed to duplicate and recast an arcane spell using way too much divine magic, when that was unreasonably important on account of sudden, unexpected actual fucking dragon, which I understand makes me formally a mystic theurge. You?
Sixth circle oracle, but still just second circle wizard. Knowing as much of the future as I do makes it hard to get yourself into the right kind of trouble. Something about the psychology of doing it to yourself on purpose doesn't make it not count exactly, but there sure is a discount. You're fortunate to have that whole snack service set up, but then I shouldn't complain since you're not so fortunate for needing it.
That sure is a perspective on my life, which is not my perspective.
Yet, she said ominously.
Ione, if you're going to use your foreknowledge to ominous at me, I'm going to leave.
Yeah, that's fair. I shouldn't be doing it even as a joke. Do anything special with the ex-queen before you sent her to hell? Feel free not to answer if it's horrible and would ruin our friendship.
Didn't send her to hell at all. She could have had all sorts of true resurrection arrangements. They petrified her and put her in a supposedly secure vault. I've actually got title to Iliosa, legally speaking. The new government got a court to rule that Iliosa should be enslaved to me as recompense for those terrible, terrible tortures she put me through. Maybe if I get powerful enough and have that much spare time, I'll pick up Iliosa again and keep her as a harem slave someday.
Like as a victim or...
As a sadist. I think she could be good at it with some training. My read on Iliosa is that she was spoiled, frankly. It's sort of sad. Past a certain point, she never had anybody in her life who could tell her what she was doing wrong or set her right. About anything, including torturing people.
You, really liked her, huh?
She was beautiful and sexual, and she sincerely tried to break me. Call me shallow then, because I am, in fact, shallow, and I'll own that.
You're different, you know. Either at Splendor 21 or at Sixth Circle, you're different.
Let me guess. You liked the old me better.
I don't think I'd put it that way. The old Pilar was nicer, maybe, but I don't want to make it sound like good is something you can ever switch off and put away, any more than you'd be okay with seeing evil like that. But we're in pretty weird circumstances, and I guess, in light of that, I can appreciate this Pilar for her being what she is.
Is that your way of saying that you morally disapprove of me, but you know I'm hot?
No.
I'm curious what you are saying. Any tiny scrap of appreciation of evil from you is progress, and I'd like to know about it and build on it and maybe bring you back to the side of hell someday.
So take Dath Ilan, which nobody in the conspiracy understood or could have understood at the time. Not even me, because I hadn't gone all the way over to good then. Even Paranza didn't understand until she went fully good herself, and that she didn't do while she was still under threat in Cheliax. There are kinds of goodness you can't express in Dath Ilan, if it's the way that Keltum described it.
You don't know?
Even Nethys can't see there from here, or so Klapati implied that Nethys implied. Neither of them is lawful, and either could be messing with me.
Huh, go on?
There's kinds of goodness you can't express in Dath Ilan. Maybe sometimes a house there catches fire and the parents have to run in and risk their own life to save the lives of their children. But no child ever starves to death there, for want of food. No mother or father ever decides to starve themselves so that their children can have a little more food. They don't die for their children slowly, one day at a time, facing down the pain and enduring it. That kind of goodness isn't a thing there. And it is better so. It wouldn't be worth setting things up so that a child could face starvation just once, so that their parents could choose to starve themselves instead, not even to complete the expression of goodness, to complete the expression of what mortals can be inside Dathilan. But if, somehow, that happened in Dathilan just once, I think they'd be able to celebrate the goodness of the parents who starved and be glad their people had proved that about themselves, even as they wished it had never happened and mourned the parents whose lives were cut short. Really, when you think about it, there's much larger pieces of goodness missing. They don't have hell at all, let alone malediction. No paladin ever risks going to hell themselves in the uncertain hope of maybe saving more people from hell than that. Not even innocent people, maybe, but just people. They would so never ever introduce hells or malediction in Dathilan just to get the paladins. But if somehow that happened to them, they would find a tiny space to celebrate that the expression of goodness in their world had become more complete.
You actually did go all the way over to good, huh?
Yeah. Once I was out of Cheliax and no longer under threat and not subconsciously trying to look a little less like a complete alien and traitor to my old friends from Ostenso. I went all the way over.
Well, you sound a little sad about that, so maybe there's still hope. Do you know why you sound sad?
Put that question on hold. I wasn't done talking about you.
Uh-huh.
So where was I? Dathilan would find a little space to celebrate the greater expression of goodness in paladins among all the mourning and wishing it hadn't been so if hell came to their universe. Because good and evil don't cancel out. I've been thinking now and then about how, being in this universe, Pharasma's creation, might have changed things compared to what Keltham is so certain is the natural state of a world. And I think, besides the categories of good and evil themselves, maybe being not the way we'd have sorted everything ourselves, we get used to thinking of people having a net total quantitative alignment and not just a huge bag of events, where each individual event is one that could have multiple aspects we'd celebrate, multiple aspects we'd mourn. You can't, actually, make up for bad things by doing good things. It can shift your alignment, but it can't cancel the reality. Every bad thing you do is just there, forever. And every good thing you do is also just there, forever. Which doesn't mean you should be sad about the badness over and over and over until the total sadness adds up to infinity. It's just the way things are in Dathilan that nobody ever judges them at the end of their lives, and they don't have any need to think of people as finally good or finally evil. Instead, people are the whole collection of everything they once did and everything they currently are.
So you morally disapprove of me and think I'm hot, and the two facts coexist.
Not literally, because if I had such an aspect of myself, a potential to appreciate that kind of hotness, Cheliax ruined it for me far past my own ability to put it back together again. Metaphorically, I suppose, yes. What you've become isn't, I think, the best Pilar Pineda you could have possibly become, from the starting point where we first met in Ostenso. If we were just considering the person you became for yourself, and not considering your effects on anyone else. But what you became instead is stronger than you were, and prouder, and finding new parts of herself, and new ways to be happy. I can celebrate that even if other people get hurt, even if I think it wasn't the best possible outcome for you personally, even if I wish our whole universe hadn't been shaped the way it was. To say that I can appreciate some aspects of the more grown-up Pilar isn't to say anything one way or another, about whether it's a good thing on net. I can celebrate, even, that our world has somebody like you in it, even as I wish it didn't have anyone like you in it. Badness and goodness don't cancel.
I'll have to think about whether there's anything useful buried under that enormous mound of heresy. Do you already know why it is that you're sad you went full good?
Because I did have evil desires in me. If I wanted to be hurtful at you, Pilar, I'd say that Cheliax ruined that for me. But probably even if there'd been no Cheliax in my past, I'd choose not to do those things, because of how other people would get hurt, if I did. And hurting people, really hurting them, not like you going on a torture vacation. Hurting people is wrong. But it means I'm not literally everything Ione Sala could possibly be in every part of herself and I can mourn that, even as I affirm that it was the right choice, and I don't wish to be otherwise.
I'm glad. It sounds like you'll be okay eventually, even after Asmodeus conquers everything.
No comment.
Elsewhere and slightly earlier.
Feanor, got a moment for something fairly important?
I expect so. Did you decide not to release Rovagog?
Not yet. Maybe with 2 more intelligence points. My demiplane of diamond synthesis has been harvested, and my party is heading off to the city of Brass momentarily. I didn't actually get 2 million wish diamonds, more like estimates since I didn't count exactly, 200,000 wish diamonds, and 1 million true resurrection diamonds. Not all of the seeds grew out the same way.
Well, I can't actually imagine any plans that need 1 million instead of 200,000, but my condolences.
If reality was just being reality, the conclusion would be that diamond just won't be a limited resource pretty soon. There'll be a material component in spells, but not a valuable component. Even if something odd happened to me and to the Iomedean whom I gave sealed instructions, the scientific revolution would still figure it out in a year or 2. The only way anything from the demiplane of diamond synthesis could actually end up being valuable was if something weird and tropey happened to make it be the case that what I did once, here, can never be done again. That's the only way that any products of this event end up valuable or rare, rather than useful, the way that water is useful. It seemed important to disclaim that part, before I gave you some things that are probably worthless and not even slightly rare as of a year or 2 later, unless something tropey happens.
People will probably start using them for jewelry like they use turquoise, he says in a tone of approval.
I wasn't sure initially if the diamond synthesis would scale around diamond dust used as seed crystals, so I also got 32 jewelry-quality diamonds, the sort that are unusually clear but too small for even a limited wish, and had those polished smooth and spherical and prestidigitated them before throwing them into the demiplane to try to ensure that early diamond deposition would be very regular for at least the next hour. I don't know if that worked, but only 3 times, or it was just some unrelated seeds that went really well. Anyways, I ended up with 3 of these. Keltham takes from his bag of holding 3 exceptionally clear unfaceted jewels, considerably larger than wish-sized, barely small enough that you could close your fist around one of them.
He stares at them open-mouthed for a little while. They're beautiful. You know, if there is something beyond 9th Circle, that's the kind of focus you'd need to get anywhere with it.
Well, I thought a bit about who should have these, if it turns out that going to the City of Brass is some huge story turning point where our party doesn't come back afterwards, etc., whatever, and these are the only big diamonds ever to exist. And you're the only person I know, outside of that party, who goes around having ideas like, maybe we can make our own shield from the outer gods and tell Pharasma to get lost, so I thought you seemed like the best fit. You're also the most combined good plus actually sensible person I know, besides myself, of course, haha, such that it seems like giving these to you would actually have good outcomes.
Thank you. I don't know if there's a way to make them into our own shield from the outer gods, but I will certainly give it a try. He reaches out and takes the diamonds reverently.
I do want a fairly serious promise that you won't misuse them or let them end up in the wrong hands, if they're at all valuable or dangerous.
If I took that tropes hypothesis of yours at all seriously, I would not be making important oaths, he says. However, I don't, so I swear to you, if these turn out to be items of power and significance, I will guard them and their secrets with my life, and with those resources I can command, and I will not allow them to be taken from me, and I'll recover them if they are, whatever that takes and wherever it takes us. Unless you or Abadar tell me to consider myself no longer bound by this oath, or my best understanding of you and of Abadar, if both of you are dead or inaccessible, would tell me that.
Yeah, fair point about the tropes. Feel very free to go arbitrarily nope at the tropes if it seems like they're trying to throw a plot at you that they wouldn't have thrown at you if you wouldn't react in an interesting way. Or do something else which is not that about any sort of non-commonsensical situation that reality seems to be trying to put you into. Or generally not to let this whole situation create drama, even if that seems on the surface like it might involve an exception to the exact words of the promise. You have my total permission and encouragement to just be unexpectedly sensible about anything that develops unexpectedly, and say, that's what Keltham said he wanted on the day he asked me for this promise.
All right. You too should try to be unexpectedly sensible, if you notice the plot trying to make you destroy the world.
I'd say give it a rest, but I rather understand why you're not. Obvious things to a Dathilani, if you end up passing these on to somebody else. Ask them for the same promise, including the sensibility clause and the clause about asking a further recipient for the same promise diagonally. From our perspective, that'd just be an automatic consequence of the original promise, but saying it out loud in case it's not.
That is sensible, but not in contracts unless you put it in them. If I pass the diamonds along, I'll ask for the same promise.
Off to the city of Brass, then. Wish me horrible luck that ends with me permadead, and you and Carissa and the Church of Iomedae trying to recover the situation with a couple of 100,000 wish diamonds.
I hope you die in a tragic and baffling fiery explosion.
Wouldn't be nearly enough. I've made the obvious true resurrection arrangements, and backup wish resurrection plans, etc. I mostly expect I'll just come back in a few hours, more intelligent and ready for a proper conversation with wished-up Carissa. But if I never see you again, my awful experience in Galarian would have been even worse without you.
My fairly great experience in Galarian would have been worse without you too. Good luck on dying.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.